good. So, how much do you guys know about murmurs? Other than what Alex maybe just half taught you? Not much. That's fine. Me neither. So, we'll go through it. So, we're going to go through a little bit of anatomy. We'll go through basic physiology, the systolic murmurs, the diastolic murmurs, other murmurs, and a little bit of JVP as well. This is where I think for murmurs, and I think what will start to happen with medicine is you'll learn that there's some things you have to feel, there's some things you just have to listen to, and so you need to like integrate all of that and see it in a patient, read it in a book, look at some pictures, and it'll come together. I think for studying this, I did a bit of all of these, so I had to draw it and imagine what's happening, as well as just listening to recordings of it, which makes sense.
There's an app called Murmurs.
There's an app called Murmurs, guys. I'm recording this, you're all famous, if it works.
So I used to have it like on my phone, you plug your headphones in and you like listen to it as I was walking to a tube where I knew that we would be talking about it.
Would be tested on them. All right. So, that's going to be annoying. And that's probably part of the reason why you can hear a lot of murmurs in different places when they're bad enough, or not as bad. So you've got semilunar valves and atrioventricular valves. I suppose most of this should just be revision, but semilunar being your pulmonary and aortic, and atrioventricular being between your atria and your ventricles, so the tricuspid and the mitral. An important thing to note is the aortic is meant to have 3 cusps, and if you don't, that's when things start going a bit wrong. So they all have 3 cusps except for mitral. And then there's a little bit of just the physiology of how it works. And so for your atrioventricular, the function of the chordae tendineae and the papillary muscles is important. And then you see that if someone has a heart attack and all of that muscle dies, you see that in the valve. So it's just sometimes important, but the rest of that is sort of superfluous. So you've got systole and diastole. Systole is your first sound and diastole is your second. So for all of these, and you'll probably get to this, but we'll draw them as S1 and S2. But your systole is when your aortic and pulmonary are open because it's all going out, and your mitral and tricuspid are closed. And I'll get to some rule of thumbs of how you guys can work out pretty much any murmur just from a few pieces of information. Diastole being when your ventricles are filling, so your aortic and pulmonary are going to be closed, so nothing comes back in, and mitral and tricuspid are open, and that's your like dub of the love dub. And I've put the YouTube link in to Amboss because I think they do really good A, notes, B, videos, and particularly on the murmurs. I quite like them. So, a picture. VARC inclusive. Oh wait, maybe that's just systole. Okay. That was necessary. So there are 2 other sounds which can be your S3 and your S4. So your S3, I don't think it's super useful to learn what they mean or why they happen, because it's rubbish. It's physiology, it's hard. But knowing when they happen, in like what murmurs they're associated with, is slightly easier to remember. But even then, I think it came up in one question, and it might have been the answer, but they've changed all the questions, so it doesn't matter. Pardon? I didn't really either. So your S3 comes after S2, and have you guys heard people say like Kentucky and Tennessee, and if you just space it out like that, it makes no sense. So your S4's over here, so you have to really like play into the word. So it's Kentucky, so it's this one, Kentucky. Does it make sense? I know, yeah, but you can't force it. And so then otherwise it's Tennessee. Yeah. You can technically like force both of them to fit, but try not to. Yeah, they exist. Whoops. Okay, so technically as the heart contracts, you will get movements of the blood because it's coming, so this is our atria, our right, because it's all coming back from the head, and this is what we can see as a JVP. When the atria contracts, there's no valve here. So a little bit as it goes down is also going to go back up. That's our first wave. So now all the blood's in here, in our right ventricle, it'll shut, and it just does a little jolt, because the blood goes, whoa, okay, not going in there. Then it's all draining in, because this guy's chucked the rest of that out, and now there's nothing in here, so it's all coming in, which is the relaxation. And then venous filling is as the rest of it goes, oh yeah, we get to move, and then we come in here. So then that's now getting full again, because it's all moved into here. And then, as you guys know, mainly the blood goes in passively, and then you get the little contraction at the end. So why is the passive emptying as it comes more into here, and then we get the same thing. So the atria contracts and a little bit goes back out.
So how do you measure this stuff?
Do not. It's fake news. I couldn't tell you how to do it. It's like almost impossible to see. The only times when it's easy to see is, I think, the large V wave. That's the only one I might have seen. And it's when you look at the patient at the end of the bed and like you see that, and it's usually, the only time I saw it, he was a really skinny, cachectic man, and his JVP was just sitting out here, and it was just like, woo! And it was just flying, honestly. Like someone was like, hey, what'd you notice about him? I was like, I just stared at the JVP the whole time, because it looks insane. And that's the only one I've seen. Yes? Yes?
The double flicker of the JVP, is that the A and A?
Yes, I would think so. Or, no, A and V, because your A, it's copied twice. Yes, A and V would be your double flicker. But even then, I mean, it's been a while since I've tried to look at a JVP, because I'm in GP, and so I just haven't looked at one in a while. But I don't. Do we see a double flicker properly?
I'm on P, so I'm not going to
I don't know. I always find them hard to see anyway. So I'd be hard pressed to really see each of these and like know what I'm looking for. Everyone happy? Any more questions about JVP?
The only time it really comes up is like the V waves or the Canon A waves.
Yeah.
Like the only two that I've ever seen any question of any sort.
And I don't even know what a Canon. Yeah. It's
very fuzzworthy. I don't think they're going to examine it.
Yeah.
They're not going to ask if you need to pick between something and this to say
Do not.
yeah.
This is like way down the priority
low on the list. Unless you're really interested. It's going to be a cardiologist.
And I suppose it's easy for us to say with hindsight, but I don't heed our advice, do what you want, but I don't think it'll come up very much. All right, here are my rules for working things out. So keeping in mind what we did before, if your valve is meant to be closed and you're hearing something, it's regurg, okay? So if it's closed and you're hearing something, it means it's not closed. And the only way that that's going to happen is, for all intents and purposes, regurg. If it's open and you're hearing an issue, it's stenosis. Okay? If it is during, what are my other rules? I've forgotten now. And it will be the same for, I've confused myself. But if we have our, systolic. Alright. So during systole, is our aorta and pulmonary open or closed? Systole, yes, open. So that means that if it's meant to be open, What kind of issue are we going to have in systole up here? Correct. And also these are like dead set the easiest ones to hear. These ones are like harder anyway. So this is we're talking about stenosis. And then our aortic and pulmonary and our mitral and tricuspid are the opposite because they can't all be open, they can't all be closed. So if you pretty much just remember that aortic is open in systole, you can pretty much work everything else out. So our tricuspid and mitral are closed. So if we hear an issue over this area, what's it going to be? Yes. Sorry, this is completely ineligible. Legible. And so, if they are open in systole, what are they in diastole? Correct. And that means that what's going to happen if there's an issue there? It's all like opposites, if any of this makes sense. So they're going to be open, and it's going to be stenosis. Everyone happy with that? So you can see that if you know a little bit of this, you can work pretty much everything else out. The questions that you'll be given will say, you hear a systolic murmur, and then it'll give you some detail of what it sounds like, and we'll go through that. Then you've already worked out, well, it's none of them, it could be these, and I'll tell you which ones out of these four are most common. So you've already gotten that down to just 2 options. So it's easier than we think. Is everyone okay with that? Good. So it says all of that there. The boxes are just arrows. Yes, so the aortic and the pulmonary, mitral and tricuspid pair together. So they do the same thing and they will have the same murmur type as well. One thing that a lot of people like to, or cardiologists like to test, is the fact that you do not get a displaced apex beat with stenosis. So the way to think about this is that in a regurgitant murmur, you're getting more blood coming back in, so you need to make a bigger space for more blood. If you have a stenosis, you need to make a thicker chamber to get the same amount of blood out. And a thick chamber is not going to be a displaced chamber. Make sense? Cool. This is how, and this is essentially what I was talking about, but it includes what the murmur types are. But in your mind at the end of this is something that you can go through. And what I think what's good about this picture is it shows that there's only 4 sounds. And there are a few others for more uncommon murmurs, but aortic stenosis and pulmonary stenosis will sound the same because they're essentially the same valve, they're doing the same thing, they're meant to be doing the same thing. It's just based on location and a few other hints. So that's just for reference. So our systolic murmurs, which we went through, are aortic and pulmonary stenosis, tricuspid and mitral regurgitation, and 2 others, which is your aortic sclerosis and Hockham, which we talked a little bit about last week. The ones in bold are the ones that I think you do need to know more about, and that is because they are more common. And that is it, they're more common. So, and then the diastolic murmurs, again, the bold ones are the ones you need to know, and aortic regurgitation is the best murmur, as a fact. It is. It's the best murmur. And I'll have you all convinced. So, aortic stenosis. So this is when you get a crescendo, decrescendo. Oh, my drawings. Never mind, I'll upload that version later. You're just missing out on such good art. I'm telling you, art.
If it's like P, mitral, and all that, is it similar?
It's similar, and it's even like hand drawn instead of me going like, why can't I get the thing to do it? Anyway, I'll upload that. That's so annoying. So it's mid-systolic, so we already know it's systolic, and it's crescendo, decrescendo. There's not much rhyme or reason about, there sort of is. if you have a small aperture, it's going to take a long time to get the blood out, and so you sort of like putting in a lot of effort, and then the rest of it sort of comes out. That sounded inappropriate, but so that's what that sounds like, and that's the crescendo decrescendo. This is by far your most common murmur, hands down. So the causes, which a lot of people like to ask, is a bicuspid valve. So if you don't have the right structure there, the trauma that having opening and closing and beating will do to that valve will be greater on a valve that only has 2 leaflets. Degenerative calcification, so this is just with age, like the rest of your body gets calcified, this will. And then rheumatic heart disease can cause it as well. The symptoms, which I'm sure you guys maybe heard in first year, maybe I'm not sure, is that it's largely asymptomatic, and then you get sad backwards, so you get shortness of breath, chest pain, and then you can lose consciousness. And they're pretty much the main symptoms. I've got the pathophysiology there, which sort of explains about, well, you've got the same amount of blood because you need that amount of blood to survive, and you've got that going through a smaller hole. So, oh God, it's good. And so you'll get thickening, and is this going to displace the apex? No, it is not. Just don't even go there. Okay. So we will have a narrow pulse pressure, and this is because it's taking longer to get the same amount of blood out. So the systolic pressure and the diastolic pressure become more similar. So you don't get a lot of pressure and then relaxation. It's like a lot of pressure for a lot longer, and then diastole is very similar. A slow rising pulse, this is the one actually. This is the one where, because it takes so long to get out of the heart, your pulse will just keep coming, keep going, keep going, keep going, because your heart's contracting for so long. You look confused. Oh yeah, for your own. Yeah, it's quite like it comes and then it goes. Whereas in aortic stenosis, it'll just drag through. You can get a split S2. Does anyone know what this is or why it might happen? Yeah, so all of your, because we know that they pair together, they both make a part of S1 and S2. When your aortic valve is like just hard, it's nasty, it's yuck, it does not contract very well and doesn't open very well. So pulmonary is going, yes, I'm so good at this, I'm so good at this, and the aortic's like, oh my God. And then this one, and I could never do this. I'm not very coordinated, but it's just not going at the same time anymore. So you get a split heart sound, so you get another one there or before. No, after, because it's going to take longer.
So
After.
the aortic valve closes later.
Yeah. So it'll take longer to open and longer to shut. An aortic thrill, no displaced apex beat, which we said, and an S4 from left ventricular compliance. I think I'd just try and remember it. The rest of it I think makes sense from physiology, but maybe trying to remember S4, I don't know. But there's lots of other hints. Yes?
How do you...
No, I was just going to say an easy way to remember S4 and S3 is that every S4 is a stenotic murmur, and every regurg like they all have the possibility to create an S4, every stenotic murmur.
Stenosis is S4.
Every regurg murmur has the ability to do an S3. So if you just have that in your mind, don't even know any more about S3 or S4, but S4 is stenotic, S3 is regurg.
Easy.
I was just going to ask how you would determine between whether the sound you're hearing is an S2 or an S3, because you can have regurg and stenosis together.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know that, like, oh, I'm listening to an S2 versus I'm listening to an S3?
I'm going to answer that by not even answering it. But I'll tell you something else instead. We got taught by a cardiologist. His name was Robert Gordon. He was like one big moon, like bless his soul. And he said that he ran a test in Eastern Health, had 100 patients that he knew had a systolic murmur and 100 patients he knew had a diastolic murmur, and less than 50% of doctors got it, and like less than, I don't know, there was also a percentage of cardiologists that didn't get it. So I think it's, even though murmurs can happen together, I think it would be well out of our scope to know, and everyone gets echoes now. It's diagnostic as much as it is, no, it's just that.
I think it's really unlikely that you'd get an
Yeah.
S3 or S4 murmur in an OSCE. If they made you listen to a murmur, it would be most likely aortic stenosis.
In real life, you could try and ask them to like hold their breath, and you can try and bring out some while quieting others. If you've like, when you're listening to patients and they breathe in the background, you're like, this is so annoying, like stop breathing. But like they can't. But they can hold their breath, and you can ask them to do that, and it's usually easy for most patients. So that's probably what I would do. And like you can sit them forward and do all sorts of different things to try and work it out. Yeah?
What does a slow rising pulse feel like?
I don't know why my brain does this, but I imagine like a bead moving through under my fingers. And so for me, it's like a little bead. Whereas for someone with a slow rising pulse, I would imagine a piece of rice that's much longer. And so that's moving through your fingers.
So you're saying you feel each beat for longer?
Yeah. Yeah, that's physiological. That's good. Yeah. Makes sense to me. I was like, I'm really going to divulge my soul here. I feel rice in my anyway, moving on. So if they do Valsalva, there's no change to the sound of the murmur. And I've skipped one very important point, is that you get radiation of this murmur to the carotids. So if they hold their breath and you listen, you can hear it there. And this is not the case with aortic sclerosis, and it will probably not be the case with pulmonary stenosis, which will have the same like crescendo, decrescendo murmur. So that's how you work out that it's aortic stenosis. Yes, all the rest is fluff and drama, in my opinion. You can do an ECG, which will show our left axis deviation, and our chest x-ray as well. This is what it was. So one of the memory tools for this, aortic stenosis, you have your ascent and then your slope. If it works, it works. It did for me. All right. But if it's right-sided, it will be inspiration. Lateral expiration. Yes, that's wrong.
Like Maddie's point before, like when you think of like inspiration and expiration, if you just think like all patients taking medicine, like your P or marine tricuspid, they're in a straight line, so they're on inspiration. So that's like another way. You can
Yes.
remember, so all the right-sided ones, which is the I, will be inspiration. Make them.
I remember it like rile, you know how like riling someone up, like R-I-L-E, right, inspiration, left, expiration.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's written wrong. For the short answer.
No.
No.
All right. Mitral regurgitation. So as we said, if we're in systole and your tricuspid and mitral are meant to be closed, and if they are not functioning, then they are regurgitating. So this is a pan-systolic murmur, which kind of makes sense. If they're meant to be closed, throughout the whole time the ventricles are contracting, blood's going back up. So it's going to happen throughout the whole systole. You can hear it best at the apex, which we know, and it radiates to the left axilla. So both of your most common systolic murmurs have some sort of radiation. There are various causes, AMI, which we went through, and also, as Alex said, rheumatic heart disease and infective endocarditis. This murmur, no it's not, it's a different one. So second most common, which makes sense. We've said that systolic is more common and your left-sided are going to be more common, and they're the ones that I want you guys to know. So this can happen acutely or it can happen chronically. What sort of cause do you guys think might be the cause of an acute mitral regurg out of the causes that are listed here? Yes, that would be one. Yeah, there's another one there. That could be, yes. AMI, that was the one that came to my mind, but I think you have, they're right as well. And then chronic could be something like the calcification, so something that's going to happen over time. So if it's chronic, it's going to be more similar to aortic stenosis, where it's asymptomatic until you hit the point where your cardiac output is terrible, and then you'll get symptoms. And then we can pretty much do the same, so ECG, chest x-ray, which will show our left-sided issues. I've got the pathophysiology for both of them there, so for chronic it'll compensate until it can't anymore. And the signs for this one, which Sophia pointed out, would be that there's an S3 because it's a regurgitating murmur, but it usually happens later, and you can have a soft S1. So can anyone justify that to me? What do you guys think? So yeah. So it's just not working. So because it's flapping in the wind, it's just not coming together. You have a jerky pulse. So if you, if this is going out, we all know this is a terrible drawing, and this guy's just doing whatever he wants. It's coming out this way, it's also coming out that way. It doesn't matter how much, there's not going to be a regular amount going either way. So your rice and your bead, and then you'll throw in like a cockroach, it'll all be different. And your pulse will just be all over the place. There's another type that you can have mitral valve prolapse, which I think of, that's going to be confusing, but I'll say it anyway. The aortic sclerosis to aortic stenosis is your mitral valve prolapse to your mitral regurg. I got a nod. I got a few nods, so yes. One of my has stuck. So it's similar, and it just has a click, which in my pictures, when I upload that, you'll be able to see. Was everyone happy with that one? Yeah, because that one's probably more common. Tricuspid regurg. It's when they, so when you like feel for it and it's like meant to like hit your hand and you're like, oh, so obvious, I can feel this. And you're just like lying through your teeth.
Who do you think might get tricuspid regurg?
You'll feel it pulsing, yes. Okay. So Hockham, which we spoke a bit about before. Does anyone remember what one of the signs of Hockham would be? And it comes up in PATH as sort of a buzzword type thing. No, it's not on here. It's about the structure of the heart. Do you guys remember? Almost. It's that you have a thickened septum. So the difference between your like a right ventricular hypertrophy or anything that thickens the heart is that it doesn't usually affect the septum, but Hockham will. And so if you have a post-mortem and you see a thick septum, or if that's in a question, not that you guys will be doing post-mortems, unless pathology, that's usually what will happen. So they do get that jerky pulse, and that's the murmur. It's probably less likely to come up. So is everyone happy? They're all our systolics. So some of them you need to know quite well, others less well. So now we're on to diastolic. This is by far the best murmur, as we said. Pardon me. So I think the easier thing about aortic is they both have that crescendo decrescendo. So this one is an early diastolic decrescendo murmur. I know this is hard when you guys don't have a visual. Well, it is for me at least. So if this is our systole, it's going to be here, but it's going to be decrescendo. So this way, like a slope down. Louder on expiration because it is left-sided, and also squatting is quite a good addition, and that's why we get asked to do them in like the dynamic maneuvers. Again, infective endocarditis, you're like, get down. And then they're an old person, they fall over and break a hip. And I just hurt my knee. So in acute, you have infective endocarditis, chronic, your bicuspid valve again. So that can do either. Older patients, maybe they can squat, who knows. Symptoms there, pretty much all of these will present very similarly. You either won't have enough blood getting out and you'll faint, or you'll have too much blood in your lungs and you'll get short of breath. Otherwise, you'll have like your left heart failure type symptoms. So, aortic regurgitation. You get really cool signs, and one of them is there because you get a high pulse pressure, and you get this like head pounding, which is this rhythmic nodding, and they just sit there and they like bob their head along. So the signs, just because the signs are so cool. So because it's a regurgitant murmur, are we going to see a change to our apex? Yes, I think yes, we will. Because it's the left, it'll push across. So our displaced apex beat. The cool signs in aortic regurgitation are Corrigan sign, which is your water hammer pulse. So because your aortic valve isn't closing, well, after the ventricles contract and all the blood goes out, this doesn't shut, there's low pressure here, and it all gets sucked back in. So the blood goes out, and you feel half a grain of rice, and then it gets pulled back in. Super cool. You get a wide pulse pressure as opposed to our narrow pulse pressure in aortic stenosis. You get our Demusset sign, which we were talking about, and you can see the blood vessels pulsating in their fingernails. I mean, so that's Kunki's sign.
So do it all.
So you do it all together, and they're just like this, and they got, and like the hands are in the air because they got like water hammer pulse. Like, isn't that just the best visual in your head? Like, you'll never forget this. And it's just the best. And it's got an S3. It's regurgitant. I didn't ever know that, but I do now. Oh, so good! Oh my god. Yes. Any questions about this one? You will never ever forget that. Like your fingers and the water hammer and their heads. I've never seen one, but I'm desperate.
I felt the water hammer.
It's just, all the rest of them are like, yeah, like pulse pressure, whatever. And like no one gets it as well, so it's even more rare and special. Honestly. Pulmonary regurg, I don't particularly care about, which is ironic, given it's pretty much the same. Pulmonary issues, that's it, bye. Who knows? Mitral stenosis, I quite like this one as well. So a mid-diastolic rumbling murmur, so you can hear it at the apex. This one's hard to hear because it's diastole. Something to note, which I probably should have said before, if you feel their pulse at the same time, technically gold standard, you're meant to like feel their carotid at the same time to time it. But like I was watching a consult, and my registrar was like listening, and then she just grabs the patient's neck. I was like, and they're like sitting there, and she's like this, and I was like, this is fine for everyone who's not listening to what you're listening to. So you can do that, but I think like it's much nicer to just hold their wrist. You know, it's like a friendly, like, what's going on? Rheumatic heart disease, AID is autoimmune diseases. That's how I write it, which I realize no one else does that. The interesting thing about mitral stenosis is it pretty much the buzzword or the most typical patient is young females who are pregnant. So when you are pregnant, you have to feed the baby, and so your like blood supply doubles and your heart rate goes up. It's probably not even double. Is it on the women's? Neither. So I don't know what the real facts are. But your heart has to pump faster, work harder, and that's when they'll present with this. So they won't know they had mitral stenosis until they get pregnant, and then at 28 weeks usually, they'll all of a sudden get all of these symptoms, and they'll feel really short of breath, and they'll have this, which is interesting. There's a bit of pathophysiology about it because it's left-sided, so you'll get left-sided ECG changes. What can happen, so I've written loud S1 at the apex, and what can happen is even though your stenotic lesions will be slow to close, when they do, they'll be quite forceful. So that's the snapping, like the loud S1, and that it can snap because instead of just like nicely closing, it's like doing that. You get mitral facies, whereas when they just have like a bit of like redness to their face, it can be quite obvious. It can be subtle. Like, do I have mitral stenosis? And this technically has an absent A wave on JVP, which I can't reason. Can you reason?
Absence of like atrial contraction, you can't really get it through.
Yeah. But it should still contract. It's a left. I don't know. Yeah, well, I didn't make that up. I don't think. I hope not. Anyway, ignore it. Pardon?
No one gets better.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah, because absent A waves is when you have atrial fibrillation as another thing. Oh, maybe I've.
It'll be related to pulmonary hypertension.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Flow effect.
Tricuspid stenosis is pretty much the same thing, so it's a diastolic murmur, but I don't really care. I wouldn't even know who this happens in. I wouldn't know how often either. A few other things that'll come up. There's a classic question about a flow murmur. So essentially, you have a flow murmur? Oh, you have a question. Sorry.
Does mitral stenosis radiate to the axilla, or is it
I do not think so.
maybe regurgitate?
Yeah. Yes, because it's down the bottom, so it's regurg. Yes. So just your stenotic, common left-sided ones will radiate, but not the mitral stenosis. Not the mitral stenosis.
What?
Just these, just aortic and tricuspid and mitral insystolic radiate, but not mitral stenosis.
Yeah. So mitral regurg radiates
Does.
to the
Is that what you asked?
yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Mitral regurg.
And
Sorry.
aortic nexus.
Yes. Did I write that it did?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You did. It was just like the grain of rice. It didn't make much sense.
No, but I didn't write that it
No.
radiates in.
Stenosis, no.
No, we were just wondering.
Okay. Yes, you can wonder. So, do you have a flow murmur? So flow murmur is the one that comes up. It's just because if you have anemia, you have a high heart rate anyway, and so you can get that. And then the other three are very like pediatric related. Wouldn't bother, to be honest. So for all of the murmurs, you will auscultate. Diastolics are hard to hear. You can do an ECG as well. So sometimes, as we said, the murmurs can be in the setting of an AMI. So you really want to do an ECG in that setting. You can do a chest X-ray as well, but otherwise your echo will be your best bet. You can have a look at the blood flow, see if it's turbulent. Are they forming clots? Do they have vegetations? Do they have normal heart structure? So what's their septum look like? Do they have dilated ventricles, dilated atria? They can measure, as I said, the aperture of the valves, what their ejection fraction is, and the mean gradient. They're all sideways arrows for everyone here. So if they're asymptomatic and you hear it, you should do an echo just to monitor it and see what's up. Symptomatic, you can manage their lifestyle. One important thing, probably in medicine in general, is that if you ask someone, do you exercise or do you get symptoms, they'll say no, mostly, because they will fit their lifestyle to the symptoms they have so that they don't get them. So someone who might have aortic stenosis might not know because they don't walk anymore, but you need to ask, can you walk up a flight of stairs? Can you walk very far? And people will do that with everything. If they have, if they can't get blood flow to their feet and it hurts when they walk, they're not going to walk. So they say they won't have symptoms. So you need to be like one step ahead of them and ask. So manage with lifestyle. If they are getting super short of breath, you can tell them to sort of exercise in other ways. There is some pharmacology that we can do, but none of it particularly helps. It's a structural issue, so we need to have a structural solution. And obviously if there's an acute reason, then we need to address that. But you can either do an annuloplasty, so you can support the structural ring around it and help that. What they can do for prolapses or regurges is just take a section of the tissue out and then it helps it like go back together again. In stenotic lesions, they put a balloon up the femoral vein or artery, depending on the side, and then they will just open a balloon inside the lesion. And I think that can happen a couple of times, but eventually it won't work as well. Otherwise, they replace it. So, valve replacements, there's 2 types. You can get mechanicals and bioprosthetics. So mechanicals are your metal valves. They last a long time, but you need to be on anticoagulation because it's foreign, it's metal, and you'll form clots on it. So it's a hard trade-off because they live longer, so you want to put them in younger patients, but then you're condemning them to a life of warfarin. So currently we can't use the direct-acting anticoagulants, and also warfarin is teratogenic. So in the situation where you had MS, being mitral stenosis, not MS, and they were pregnant, you'd sort of have to manage them until the baby's out, and then they deliver the baby, and then you've got to consider what to do. So it's actually quite a hard discussion to have. Bioprosthetics, they have a shorter lifespan, so you can give them to older patients, and you just anticoagulate them for a little while. I think it could be a counselling station, or at least knowing a little bit about them, but they're the main 2 things. You need to know how long they last and what kind of anticoagulation they need to be on, and that's about it. I suppose one thing to know about warfarin is that you need to have regular INRs, and at the start it can be daily or every second day, and then after that it can back off a little bit, but it can be quite an impedance on people's lives.
That's also a counselling station for us.
Yeah.
Or explanation station, sorry.
Yes, for us, you end up working out some drugs that they might ask you to explain, and warfarin is one of them, even though it's not used particularly much. But we will go through that. Maybe today, maybe not today. Not today. So these are some YouTube links to the Ben Amberg ones. Alex and I, towards the end, would just get them up on our computer and say, "What's this?" And you'd listen to it, and I would tap them out, and I'm like, "Oh, what's a rice sound like?" Just kidding, I wouldn't. But just getting a feel for what they sound like, so you can know the physiology. I'll also upload the version that has the drawings on it, so looking at them, trying to understand, okay, would that sound like I'm not going to try and do it because everyone looks silly when they try and make the sounds of a murmur, but imagining to yourself, well, what is this going to sound like, and can I pick it up if someone plays it to me? In the past, they've had OSCEs where they'll do a history, and they'll have to find information, and then they'll be handed headphones and asked to identify the murmur. They had another version of that where they did...
Pulse? Can we feel it?
No.
I'm going to say, well...
I think you should ask.
They did the year above us, they did.
They didn't...
Not a year above us, the 5th years, 2 years above us, they did.
They didn't tell them...
But I asked her, I was like, how do you know without feeling the pulse? And she's like, well, you just say that. Well, I can hear that it goes for the whole thing, so it could be pan-systolic or pan-diastolic, however I like to feel the pulse.
Yeah.
To make sure.
They also weren't told the region that it happened over, but I think asking for it and saying, where did this happen, they'll say, I can't tell you, or whatever they'll say. I know, it's pretty rude. But the good thing about having it on a history is that it'll most likely be aortic stenosis. You will get those symptoms of the SAD, and you'll already know before you put it on that it's going to be the most common murmur. You already know the age demographics, which is going to be an older patient. So before you've even put it on, you're pretty much thinking it's going to be aortic stenosis. The exam was harder because you're examining a normal patient. So then you have to listen to the murmur with no context. Just as a OSCE tip, we had to listen to lung sounds. So it is important that you guys know what certain things A, should sound like, and B, actually sound like. Yeah, so these are good ones. I've got a few.
Yeah, you do, on the listening to sounds things, you do a history. I was in a history, right, beforehand. So like Soph just said, we went in there knowing that it was going to be a pneumonia. So when you listen to the sounds, you just kind of describe what you think pneumonia should sound like. And it would be the same thing with a murmur. You go into it if you're doing a cardio exam and they give you a murmur to listen to, or a cardio history and they give you a murmur to listen to, you can from the history think about what murmur it would be and then sort of play into it that way. They're never going to just make you listen to something without any context. So don't freak out.
And they gave it to you, did they tell you which side of the lung or
for you guys? It's like whatever.
No. I think for us they gave us a chest X-ray as well, but probably afterwards. So then you described that and said, okay, well, given auscultation and the chest X-ray in front of me, I think this is a right lower lobe pneumonia. And then I say, how do you manage it? And you're like, fuck. And then you get through it anyway. But we'll go through pneumonia and we'll go through all of that, and you guys will be great. Better than us. So I've got some cases. Otherwise, I have.
Can I go through my mnemonic first?
Oh yes. Would you like to this?
So I've got an easy cheats way of remembering the murmurs because I suck at cardiophysiology and I forget every time which valves are open and closed during which. I always have to remind myself what systole and diastole are. So cool.
And you'll get through still.
I still passed. So this is how I remember murmurs. So you really only need to know one thing to rule things in and out. So it's kind of like what Maddie said. If you know this, then you know the rest of them. This is my way of knowing one thing and then knowing the rest of them. Has everyone heard of ASMR? Yeah, you like that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, ASMR, and just imagine someone like breathing into the microphone and saying, systole. I'm serious. That's it. Aortic stenosis, mitral regurg is systole. You know that aortic and pulmonary valve do the same thing? So it's essentially PS, TR. And then diastole, it's just opposite. AR, MS, etc. for diastole. That's how I remember. So in the exam, that's literally what I was writing and saying in my head.
Yeah.
When it says like it's a systolic murmur, I automatically know it's these because it's never going to be these. Well, actually, it could be tricuspid regurg. That's a lie.
In an exam, it could be them.
Yeah, it's never going to be pulmonary stenosis.
Yeah.
So at least that cuts down your list of 8 or how many to 3. And then by your radiation and stuff, you can figure out what it is.
Yeah. So it's
So that's, you can use that if you don't remember the physiology later.
What I might do, I'm gonna, if you guys, these are some buzzwords you guys can go through in your own time. As Alex said, there's like buzzword documents, or we can already see Corrigan sign, woo! But anyway, we'll go through that. I've got some questions which I think would be better. We can just do these ones and you guys can go through the rest of them in your own time. So what I would like you guys to do is go through it. Once you think you know what it is, put your hand on your head. And no pressure, and it's also like a failure safe environment. So if you fail, whatever, we did as well. Because one of the last people I would like to explain why they think it is the murmur they think it is. And we will not judge.
It took me a long time.
Alright, maybe I'll do a reverse. You've got your hand in your head. Can you explain what your reasoning is or what you're thinking?
Like fully. My first thing was it was a young woman and said that blow murmurs are common.
With anemia, yes. So I think it's a good question to see that they put information in for a reason. So she has a history of menorrhagia. So she's bleeding a lot. She looks pale. She's tachycardic, and it's a soft murmur. She doesn't, and if she's collapsed, it's probably like more acute. And young people tend to be well. So yes, I think it is also a flow murmur. So you are perfectly right. And her like blood pressure is normal, and it's telling you that there's no real other sign. She doesn't have any heaves or thrills, so it hasn't been going on for a long time. So perfectly right. The next one, if you guys work, see what you think. I might just go through it. Sometimes I like to skip to the end. You know, like you get a good book and you're like, ooh, what happens? Just kidding. So if you go to the end, it says it's an ejection systolic murmur. So you're already thinking systolic. So we're already on this side, we're already at the ASMR or the PSTR. So we've got that. It's the left sternal edge. So we're thinking left-sided, which cuts out these guys. So we've already got AS and MR. Out of those two, which one's the more common one? Correct. And then it also radiates to the carotids. So even based on those last two sentences, you've pretty much got it. You go back and you look, okay, well he's 72, he's older.
Right sternal edge.
Yeah. Because it's otherwise it would be, because that would be.
Yes, all patients takes money. I think you actually can hear it everywhere. Because I still think it is aortic stenosis, but it's just because you can technically hear it everywhere. Yes?
We listened to a patient yesterday and
Yeah.
it was louder over the pulmonary bubble.
Yes. I think it's not uncommon from memory. Yes, so you are exactly right. It's technically not over the aortic area, but I think it still is. And probably this might have been a discriminating question in that it discriminates where everyone is on the spectrum. So knowing that it can still happen, and plus you've got good evidence to think that it is aortic stenosis. He's older, he doesn't have any symptoms, which is also not uncommon. So hopefully it is aortic stenosis.
Radiation, then you would say pulmonic, or would you still guess aortic?
If it was there, I would say aortic sclerosis, because pulmonary stenosis is it happens in tetralogy of Fallot, so it's, even though it's got the right sounds, it's even less common than sclerosis.
And tetralogy of Fallot is like a congenital heart defect in babies, and they usually have that corrected before they're like 7.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be common.
So you never like hear pulmonary stenosis. It like this year it won't be an answer for anything. So just ignore that.
It'll be an option.
It'll be in the options list.
Yeah.
Just like fill it out, but it will never be an actual answer.
All right, the next one. What do you guys think? Nice. I've already forgotten everyone's names. You both have super vibrant tops, but like this.
My thought was that tricuspid regurg. My pansystolic.
Yes.
And it's also got peripheral edema,
Mhm.
which is like just like a lot of backflow.
Yep.
Yes.
It's got tricuspid regurg back into the right atrium, back to the cava.
Excellent. I agree, and I think as well with the right-sided, the lung issues, because it's a right-sided murmur. And yes, we said pansystolic because while my drawings are all blending together, it's just flapping in the wind and it's coming back out the whole time while the ventricles contract. So you're exactly right. And does anyone remember what other sign there was of pulmonary of tricuspid regurg? Yes. Nice work. So yes, it was that. I'll leave you guys with the rest of the questions. Just go through them in your own time. If you have any questions, ask me or one of these guys. And that is it. If you guys have questions now, do whatever.